Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Brachah, Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of James, the 5th chapter. And in here, as the apostle James ends off in his writing his epistle to the Israelites, right? It mentioned in the first chapter to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad. He addresses certain matters, namely the unrighteous deeds, okay, by the rich, and also, in final exhortation to the believers in the patience of suffering, but having the hope that the Lord is going to recompense us justly. Okay, now I'm going to pull up just a small part of the commentary here on this chapter in a bit, but it's important to keep in mind that at this point when James was writing, you did also have at this time rich Israelites, that were that this applied to a degree, right? Because they were also corrupt, right? And they were not living in a in a manner that was humble, okay, but rather abusing their status, their wealth, and their power, which is something that's not new, okay, in Israel. But as I said, this also applies partially to them, but also it applies like the greater condemnation of what James is saying here concerning these rich also apply now to the rich of our time, right? Because back then, you may have had the rich of Israel that were guilty of these things, but now you have the rich of the world, which are in the form of these elites that are guilty of this, right, to a far greater degree. And likewise, they're also going to be judged and suffer the condemnation that is written in here. Now you might ask, or somebody might ask, well, if James is writing to the Israelites in there, and how do you then know that this applies, or that he's talking about these elites now? Well, it applies to them. Okay, are they not guilty of the things that we're about to read? We'll find out very soon when we read it. And this is also an example of the layers of the scriptures, right? When you read, it's not just in this chapter, but there are many other other chapters that are layered, and the scriptures tell you about how some of these writings are spiritually discerned, and you need the Spirit of the Lord on you to understand and be able to connect the dots in there, because at the end of the day, there's only one truth. So before going into this, I'm going to pull up here. This is James, some commentary on it. I'm just going to read this last part here because this sort of starts to give a bit of context as to what was also happening at this time when James wrote this, right? So it says, then follows a pronouncement of judgment on the greedy landowners. These people hoard wealth and goods that only perish with age and disuse, but show no interest in helping the poor and needy around them. They grow rich through oppressing and cheating their workers. But God takes notice of all this. They are only building up evidence against themselves, which will bring for them a heavier punishment. Like animals, they are fattening themselves only to be slaughtered. Because of their wealth, they have power to do as they wish, but all their achievements will not save them on the day of judgment. And I believe Proverbs 11 also goes into that. Riches profit not in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivereth from death. So this is James chapter 5, verse 1. It says, go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Right? Because, yeah, for a season, for a point in time, it's you can enjoy those riches, but the how they were gotten, right? The scriptures talk about ill-gotten gains, more so in the sense of these elites now, how they got their riches, okay, but also what they did with it. Generally, most people that are rich, they it's easier for them to go astray or to live a cruel or wicked or insolent life because they feel as though with the power of riches, they don't have to be subject to humility, or really to what anybody tells them. But there's always a judgment. right? James mentioned this in the first few chapters, that you're going to die just like everybody else. You're going to lose your riches. It says here, your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eaten. Here in the NLT, it says, your wealth is rotting away and your fine clothes are moth-eaten rags. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. So it says here, your gold and silver have become worthless. The very wealth you owed. It tells you that in I forget what chapter it's in, but it mentions that their gold and silver shall not save them. They're gonna cast their gold or their silver into the streets, because when the time of judgment comes, it doesn't matter how much money, how much gold and silver you have. That's worthless. You can't buy life. Okay, when what I mean by that is you can buy a good living, right? You can buy good medical treatment, but you can't buy life, because life is controlled by the Father, right? Which now He's given control of that to the Son. But anyway, it's controlled by Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. It says, the very wealth you were counting on will eat away your flesh like fire. It will basically be that the wealth that they have will be the cause or the driving factor of their judgment. This treasure you have accumulated will stand as evidence against you on the day of judgment. So, for example, when you let's say you have somebody that is that has gotten a lot of money, but it's not through righteous means, and let's say somebody's a drug dealer, right? They're selling drugs, they're doing illegal things, and they make a lot of money. Now, if the stash where their money is found, okay, they're where they store their money, if that's found by like investigators or the police, the way that it stands as evidence against them is that, well, questions start to arise. You say, okay, hold on, you have all this money, let's check your records and see what job were you doing legally to give you all this money. What job were you doing? Were you an engineer? Were you a nurse? Were you a doctor that you were getting all this money? Did somebody wire it to you? Was it a gift? Did you have some secret inheritance somewhere? And what they're gonna find out in doing that research is you got this by you got all this money right here, which prompted the looking into how it was acquired, and you find out that this was by illegal means. So even dealing with like these elites today, a lot of the money that they have, which as it says is going to stand as evidence against them, is gotten by ill means. But it is through that wealth they have been able to promote such wickedness on the earth. You think if they were poor, they'd be able to do that? No. Through the money, they gain influence. Mayor Amschel Bauer said that. Give me control of a nation's, the money, and I care not who makes the laws, because who controls the lawmakers? The money. Whoever controls the money. So it's going to stand as evidence against them, against their wicked deeds that they've done. As it says, you have heaped treasures together for the last days. But all that is going to avail nothing, because your treasures will not deliver you from judgment, right? Both to those that were being wicked in this time, wicked Israelites that were abusing their power through money, but more prevalent to these elites today in our time that are also abusing their power through money. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields. Those are the workers, right? The laborers are the workers. Which of you is kept back by fraud, right? Remember when we went back here, it mentioned about the greedy landowners who were oppressing and cheating their workers. Guess who's doing that today? It's not Israel. Back then you had Israelites doing it, but today who's doing that? And to what degree? We'll discuss that in a second. So it says here, which is kept, because the scriptures talk about how you're supposed to not hold back a man's wages. So it says, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, right? Those laborers, because you're not paying them. And the cries of them which have reaped, which have labored, are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth, Now, let's look at how does that look like today, right? Today, you're not actually on somebody's, I mean, you may be a farmer, right? But most of us are not on somebody's field reaping. But we work, right? We work for companies, work for corporations, you work for industries, which ultimately all the way at the top are owned by these elites. Now, if you look at the way they've set up this monetary system, it is keeping back your wages by fraud. Look at the taxes they take out. Okay, things that don't even make sense. You're the one working, but you don't even get to see your paycheck until what? Most places they pay you what? Bi-weekly. Some places weekly, but most places bi-weekly, semi-monthly. And even that, what you get is a portion of what you've actually worked for, because they put in different excuses as to why they got to take money off of what you've done. So they're really holding back what they owe you. Okay. And as it says, the cries of them that have reaped, the laborers, have entered into the ears of the Lord, because these are unrighteous decrees. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Let's go into that word wanton or wanton. It says here to live luxuriously, lead a voluptuous life, given one's self to pleasure. But at the expense of who? At the expense of the poor, at the expense of those that were suffering for you to have this voluptuous life. Right? So you've lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. You have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. And the day of slaughter, like one example is if you look up here, sheep shearing event in ancient. It says here, sheep shearing in ancient Israel. This is just one example. Was a major, joyous agricultural festival. Marking is sometimes called Hagez, marking a time of abundance and communal gathering and celebration. It was characterized by grand, king-like feasts, heavy drinking, and social hospitality, often serving as a backdrop for important social, political, and economic events. So with king-like feasts and heavy drinking and social hospitality, at that point, if you are there, what are you're that's an example of you nourishing your heart, right? And that would be like one example, looking at it from this angle, like as in the day of a slaughter. Like it's like today, people go to Thanksgiving party, and they just let it go. The belt buckle is already off. That joint, they know where you putting a belt on that day. The button of the pants already flew off. The button of the shirts flew off. The belly's out, right? But as it says, you nourish your hearts as in a day of slaughter. So in the one sense, like I just gave that example. And when you look here, let's read how it's written on here. It says, NKJV, you have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your hearts as in a day of slaughter. See? NLT, you have fattened yourselves for the day of slaughter, which in both senses apply, right? Because you're living luxuriously and nourished is going to eventually end up, the Lord is like fattening you up for the day of your slaughter, which in application to the elites of our time, they're not really going to be slaughtered because they're going to be preserved for judgment. But you can liken the slaughter onto the suffering of the captivity that they'll go in. Okay, so on the one hand, yes, they are. The Lord has prepared them and fattened them up for that time. But also on the other hand, they are nourished as though this was a day of a great slaughter where they just like a feast. Because that's how they're living, right? In pleasure. Voluptuously. Wanton. Ye have condemned and killed the just. Who are the just? The righteous. And he doth not resist you. Because in most cases, you can't. Right? You don't have the means to. But at the hand of them with their power, they're able to do this. So James here, as he continues on to exhort the believers, right? Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth. Right. So just like, and hath long patience for it. right? So when you plant, if you're a farmer, if you plant, you're not getting a harvest the next day. You got to wait. So we're likened onto husbandmen or farmers who have planted through our labor, but we have to endure. We got to wait. We got to, water and hope for that rain. And with patience, wait for the harvest until he receive the early and latter rain. Because once again, you plant, you need the rain, and then the crops grow, and then eventually the harvest season comes. Be ye also patient, establish, strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. So the Lord's return is near. So be patient. It'll be here before you know it. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. So now is not a time for that, right? Holding grudges, being adverse one to another, having ill thoughts. It says to sigh, to groan, to be in straits with grief. It says here, don't grumble about each other, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. For look, the judge is standing at the door. So he's right here. Put aside those, those immature behaviors and those differences, because the Lord is pretty much right at the door. Take my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job. So he's saying, look, yes, you're suffering things too, but look at the prophets of old. Look at them as an example of suffering and patience. Look at Job, for example. Right? Ye have heard of the patience of Job and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. Right? So you see how the Lord dealt with him as he continued in patience. Yeah, he was grieved, but in maintaining his integrity towards the Lord, he was rewarded, and it shows the Lord's pity and mercy. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, and your nay be nay, lest ye fall into condemnation. Yahushua said that, right? Because anything more that cometh of these is evil. Because if your yes or your no is not enough, you don't want to run the risk of taking an oath and then not keeping that. So let one be trustworthy. And if you say yes, do it. If you say no, then that's it. It's no. You don't do it. Is there any among you, or is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. And I wanted to read, let me see, I think it's in the 5th chapter here. Let's see. Yeah, it says here, James further warns that swearing rash oaths will not help them bear their trials. He suggests that they would do better to speak and act normally. When believers are going through times of trouble, they should not complain or swear, but pray. When they are happy, they should not act foolishly, but sing. Okay, so going back to James 5, it says, is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of the faith shall save the sick. So that's it's not figurative. It's not an overstatement. It's true. Don't underestimate your prayers, and don't underestimate the prayers of the church. Okay, because as it says, the prayer of faith shall save the sick. If you think, oh, you're not feeling well, I'm gonna just take some herbs and then call it a day. Look, that you're underestimating the power of the next brother's prayer. When you when you're not feeling well, or a brother's not feeling well, or whatever the case is, and you let brothers know and they pray for you, it's a powerful thing. You may think, oh, it's because you slept, and no. It's what the Lord was doing in the behind the scenes in the spirit due to all the prayers. But more importantly, the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. That's powerful. So don't underestimate the prayer of the faith, the prayer of faith. or of the faithful. Confess your faults one to another and pray one for another that ye may be healed. All right, let's go back here again. Let me see if I can find where. Yeah, it says here, if Christians confess their faults to each other, they can pray more intelligently for each other's needs. So when you confess your faults, it's not saying go and just tell everybody your whole business. But if there's certain things that you're struggling with or you've done, or with more insight, the prayers can be more directed to whatever it is. Right, as he says, as the commentary said, that the believers can pray more intelligently for each other's needs, not just for what you've done and for forgiveness for it, but also a brother might be able to pray for things that are spiritually beneficial to you. Right, if there's certain weaknesses that you have. Right, so it says, and pray one for another that ye may be healed. The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Okay, so the continual prayer of fervent, okay, that strong prayer in faith of a righteous man availeth much, meaning it's let's just say it holds weight. Let's go into that word availeth. Availeth, to be strong, right? To have power, to be a force. So once again, don't underestimate the power of prayer, because it works wonders. Elias was a man subject to like passions as we. So James is giving an example here, saying, look, Elijah was a man just like us. And he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall hide a multitude of sins. So here he makes the point that, look, Elijah, a man like us, he prayed, and his prayer was answered, as the scriptures tell you. So likewise, when you pray, have faith, because the Lord will answer our prayers too. Okay, and then he goes into here, right? If one errs from the truth, and one convert him, right, to bring him back, you've saved that sinner from death. And the scriptures talk about how the angels rejoice in heaven at one that have repented, than many that have fallen to sin, roughly paraphrasing. Let me see. I'm just looking up on here. Angels rejoice Luke 15:10. It says, likewise I say unto you, there is joy in the presence of the angels over one sinner that repenteth. See? So as it says here, James 5:20, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall hide a multitude of sins. So it'll be counted good on your part as well. As it says here, NLT, you can be sure that whosoever brings the sinner back will save that person from death and bring about the forgiveness of many sins. And that brings us to the end of the book of James, the 5th chapter, and the end of the entirety of the book of James. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.